Hi there, welcome to Boy Meets Quilt. I'm Andrew Vay Hansen, and you see here behind me my latest quilt that I just made, and I made it for the upcoming fence quilt show that the Brooklyn Quilters Guild is putting on. This will be our fourth fence show, which is amazing and awesome. I'm so glad that our guild is still doing these outdoor shows. So the theme, the title for this show, it's something, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's like Reimagine, Repurpose, and Reuse, or something like that. I'll put the official title in the description box below. It's going to be in the first weekend of April of 2022, and I'm excited to have this done. I got it done well in advance, so I can not have to worry about it and procrastinate. Because I was working with some really different materials, and I wanted to make sure I had enough time to get it done if I ran into any obstacles along the construction. So, as you might imagine from the title, the whole point of this show, the whole theme, is to repurpose materials that you would not normally use in quilts and make them into these beautiful works of art. And so the organizers of this fence show asked that everyone make a 36 by 36 inch quilt where at least 75% of the materials in the quilt are repurposed textiles. And that does not include quilting scraps. They really wanted to encourage us to go through our homes and find textiles that you would not normally use in quilts, that you're not using for anything else, old clothes that you're either gonna donate or just throw out, old placemats, napkins, bed sheets, whatever you can find that you were just not using anymore, and then you can repurpose them into a quilt. And so I really set out, I wanted to make a 100% repurposed quilt, with the exception of the thread. The thread is brand new thread. But otherwise, I was successful. My entire quilt is made out of repurposed textiles. So I'm really happy that I was able to do that. You might have noticed that I have a really long video that documents the journey of this quilt from the design all the way to the finish. And so you can certainly feel free to watch that, but I wanted to make a truncated video for my trunk show, my virtual trunk show series, so that in case you don't want to watch like an hour-long video, I don't know how, I haven't edited that video yet, so we'll see how long it ends up being, but this will be much shorter. So as you can see, I chose a very basic patchwork design. I basically made 6 strips of varying sized rectangles that I then stitched together. And the reason I kept the quilt top design basic like this is because I was working with so many different kinds of textiles, so many different textiles with fiber contents that don't necessarily mesh well together when you're sewing them together, and so many different textures, and I didn't know how complicated it was going to end up being piecing everything. So I just wanted the piecing to be, I wanted the only complication for the piecing to be the textiles themselves. I didn't want to have to worry about lining up seams or matching points or anything like that, you know, quilters always love to make beautiful, complicated quilt tops. And I am one of those quilters. I love doing that. But for this quilt, I kept it really simple. I never worried about lining up seams or anything like that. So all I worried about was the piecing. And the piecing was a little tricky. I ended up using a walking foot for my piecing, which helped. But even then, you know, these sweaters that I used, they did not sew the same way that that just normal cotton, woven cotton sews. And then especially these ties, I'm not sure, I don't think it's even silk, I think it's like a polyester. It completely, I had to pin anytime I was using, sewing together anything that connected with one of these pieces of tie, I ended up pinning that material, which I normally don't pin, especially something as basic as a patchwork quilt. But I definitely had to pin with that because otherwise it just got so skewed when I pieced things together. But other than that, it came together really easily. and I'm really pleased with the result, and I'll just take you through all the different materials that I used. So I have a couple of sweaters. One is a sweater, a cashmere sweater that my mom donated, this blue cable knit sweater, which is beautiful. And then one of my old sweaters. And then I have a pair of old jeans that I cut up. I have an old shirt that I made in a sewing class and that I was able to keep some of the buttons from the shirt and put in the quilt. These two ties that my grandfather gave me that I've never ever worn, because they're not just the style of the ties are not something that I ever want to wear. And so I thought it would be a fun way to pull these ties out of the back of my closet where I never see them and actually put them into a quilt that I can look at and think, oh, my grandfather gave me those ties. An old pillow sham that I've never used that I just happened to find in the back of my linen closet when I was trying to source materials for this quilt. What else? A pair of socks where had holes in the feet. And then an old curtain, an old velvet curtain from our old apartment that no longer fit in the windows of our new apartment, and so it's just been collecting dust in our linen closet. So that's the quilt top, and then the quilt back is made up of an old cotton bed sheet. And then the batting of the quilt is actually from a set of bamboo bed sheets that I don't use anymore, again, because they have holes in them. And so I used 2 layers of the bamboo sheet as my batting. And then the binding is made from the lining, the blackout lining that was part of this old velvet curtain that I used in the quilt top. So I managed to successfully create I would say a 99.9% recycled, repurposed quilt from other textiles. Again, the only thing that's not repurposed is the thread. And I didn't do a lot of quilting, so there's not a lot of thread that I used other than for the piecing and then for the quilting. So that's that. Let's take a closer look at some of these textiles and how they look when you take a really good close look at them. So here is a full shot of the quilt, and let's zoom in and see some details. I'm going to start off with this beautiful cashmere sweater that my mom graciously donated to the quilt when she found out this is what I was doing. I love these cable knits, and so I featured that quite a bit throughout the quilt. And then we have a pillow sham. And the fun thing about this pillow sham is that depending on what side I used, it had a different color scheme, whether the blue was dominant or the brown was dominant. And so that's a tip that I actually picked up from Jenny Doan of Missouri Star Quilt Company. But something I will share along with you, always look at the back of your fabrics, no matter what. This is another example. Here's the front of my sweater. Here's the back of my sweater. And they're both equally beautiful textures. I also, with the sweaters, I also took some of the rib knits from along the waist and the wristbands and incorporated those into the quilt. I tried to keep certain notions, details, and different things like the buttons from this shirt, the back pocket of a pair of jeans with the little Levi's tag there. I thought that was fun. And then this little mini pocket that you get in the 5-pocket jeans, that whole trademark of the Levi's. So yeah, and then everything else is just pretty standard material that's been cut up and used as patchwork. This is from a pair of socks that had holes in the feet, so why not use the cool orange top of the sock as part of the quilt? And so there you go. That is Patchwork Memories. So I call this quilt Patchwork Memories because most of these textiles aren't necessarily special memories for them, but I do know where they all come from, and so they do create a little bit of a memory quilt for me, which is lovely, and it's a patchwork quilt. And so thanks for watching this video. Stay tuned for future videos as I continue to go along my quilting journey. And please ask any questions, type any comments. I'd love to know what you're doing on your quilting journey or your making journey, whatever you're creating. And thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.